talking a little bit about today is ultimately how our Heavenly Father breathes and speaks reassurances to us in moments of anxiety and concern and tension and stress. Insecurity, as you know as well as I do, is something that's common to all of us. We've all felt insecure, probably recently, will again. Certainly there's the insecurity that's expressed in like the self-doubt that we see in every middle school student. But also there's insecurity in this more collective and global sense. You hear about insecurity a lot these days. Here's some examples. There's economic insecurities. You've probably heard about those lately. Food insecurities, cyber insecurities. There's imbalances of global power that makes us feel insecure. There's medical insecurities. There's housing insecurities. There's climate insecurities. There never seems to be enough blood at the blood bank insecurities. There's not enough doctors. There's not enough nurses. There's not enough teachers. There's not enough schools. And there are seemingly countless ways in which countries and the citizens of those countries are facing insecurities. And when insecurity shows up and walks into our lives, then anxiety is not far behind. There's sort of a package deal. And anxiety tends to insist that it stick around until something else comes in and leaves us feeling reasonably assured that it will be okay. Because insecurity is such a common experience in human beings, it probably shouldn't surprise us then that we can feel insecure about our safety in God's grace and our security in the truth that we really do belong to Him. We all know too well those moments of spiritual insecurity in which we ask, am I really saved? Am I actually okay in God's eyes? Am I really forgiven for that? That really won't count against me? Surely that must. Am I, of all people, really loved? If I were to die today, would I really be with Jesus? The good news for all of us is God is faithful to save us, but maybe something we don't celebrate enough is that God is faithful to assure us and reassure us and reassure us as often as we need it. Dare I say, in fact, even every single day. And so today we're going to talk about what John the Beloved said about assurance. Some theologians would tell you that the book of 1 John is, in fact, really, generally speaking, a whole book on assurance. That's sort of the theme of this book, of just reassuring believers of what's true, what they can count on, what they have believed in, that it's good and valuable, true. And then I think it gives us some practical applications, a lot of practical applications. For if we are feeling insecure, what can we do about it? But maybe what we're already doing about it or not doing about it, and how assurance is really such a basic gift of God to His people, to disciples. If you want to read in your own Bible, we're going to look at chapter 3, verses 19 to 24. 3:19 to 24. So we pick up kind of in the middle of a section here, but John says, "This is how we know that we belong to the truth, and how we set our hearts at rest in His presence. If our hearts condemn us, we know that God is greater than our hearts, and He knows everything. Dear friends, if our hearts do not condemn us, we have confidence before God, and receive from Him anything we ask because we keep His commands and do what pleases Him. And this is His command, to believe in the name of His Son, Jesus Christ, and to love one another as He commanded us. The one who keeps God's commands lives in Him, and He in them, and this is how we know that He lives in us. We know it by the Spirit He gave us." So for the last couple of weeks, of course, we've been talking about John's The More You Know campaign. And in this section of chapter 3, we have two more "this is how you know," or "the more you know" statements. I'll isolate them for you here. We've got verse 19 and verse 24. This is how we know that we belong to the truth and how we set our hearts at rest in His presence. And this is how we know that He lives in us. Those are powerful statements. A generation of people that know they belong to the truth, know that their hearts can be at rest in His presence, and know that God lives in them. That's a secure group of people. That we belong to the truth, that our hearts can be at rest, that God is in us as we are in Him. In the midst of a world filled with uneasiness and insecurity, perhaps we have failed to at times promote the great gift, maybe not always perfectly understood, but the great and consistent gift that assurance is in the Christian faith. That we are a people that can live assured. Religion is always about doing one more thing. It's always about hoping that God or the gods notice and that they find pleasure in us and they're pleased with us. God is this never ever satisfied father that's just always irritated with his kids. And so that's how we approach Him. This is the idea of religion. But Christianity is about knowing for certain that God doesn't just notice, but He sees us. The God who sees me. All the way back to the book of Genesis. And that by His grace, not our work, we're saved. And that He accepts us so much that He lives in us and invites us to live in Him. So understandably then, in this world of insecurity, John wants his friends to feel secure. That they have communion with God and that there's assurance available. So we're going to basically work through just two big points. One's like a great big reminder, and one's maybe a practical working of this out. As I've told you, the intention of this message and even this series is very much a revisiting of the foundation of our faith. This is going to be gospel stuff again today, because I'm convinced that we are in need of regular reminders of the good news. Encourage one another with these words, we say, right? And so we're going to just dive into the basics of that again and then unpack it. So here we go. Here's your basic point to get us going. The heart does not get the last word. John says, this is how we know that we belong to the truth and how we set our hearts at rest in His presence if our hearts condemn us. We know that God is greater than our hearts and He knows everything. So in verse 20, John teaches that the heart can be a troublemaker. Countercultural, stark contrast to the ever-popular secular narrative that tells you just follow your heart. Be true to your heart. John here reminds us actually the heart can be a bit of a problem. Sometimes the heart gets up to things that are not good for us. The heart, or what we could call the inner voice, some might translate this as like our conscience, can be at times the cause of our spiritual insecurity. Our own inner voice is the cause of our anxiety. Sometimes now the heart does speak truth. It speaks conviction, and we want to respond to that, and we want to make the appropriate changes that it's inviting us to. But sometimes our heart speaks lies. We pick up things, we hear things, people maybe say something in us, and we believe it, and we shouldn't. You remember that Satan is called the accuser, and remember that we are told that his native tongue is lies. And so when anything that is not of God's truth latches on to us and we start to absorb that and work that out, and it gets into our heart and we're contaminated and we speak it to ourselves, we can start to feel very insecure even from our own voice. So John says then, whatever the source of our heart's condemnation, whether ourself or someone else, the enemy, John encourages us that the condemning heart doesn't get the last word over our life. If our hearts condemn us, God is bigger than our hearts. How often has your heart managed to operate as your accuser and made you the defendant in its courtroom? It's a pretty regular experience in my life. But just because this is true doesn't mean we should despair about it, because in that courtroom, the heart can accuse all it wants. The judge is God, and God's spoken. And the last word belongs to Him and Him alone. The final decision regarding salvation and our belonging and our acceptance and our rest is not up to our heart. The final word actually belongs to a very, very, very big God. And what's the final word then that God has spoken? Well, it's Jesus. The author of Hebrews tells us God once spoke through prophets, but in these last days He has spoken through Jesus, His Son. And it is this word that is Jesus, the Son of God, and all He's accomplished, and all that He offers to us, that promises to receive us based not on our goodness, not on our heart's own merit, but on the righteousness of Christ and nothing else. Now, you've heard that before, but I ask you again, that's amazing, is it not? God accepts us, John says, not because He doesn't know our worst secrets, not because He doesn't know our darkest motives. John says God knows everything, and He still accepts us. We didn't get in because we managed to sneak something by God. He sees it all, knows it all, and still accepts us. Because if we've placed faith in Jesus, we're new creations. We're not what we were. We're something new, and we wear Jesus' righteousness, not our own. And what John wants these readers to know then is that if our hearts condemn us, and they can do it all they want, it makes no difference in our status now or the future still to come. God has promised to gladly, and this is an amazing thing, not begrudgingly, not like exasperatedly, gladly receive us. God gladly has received you. I guess I'll let them in. No, that's not it. There's delight, there's welcome, there's celebration, gladness in the heart of God when He welcomes wretches like us in as new creations. If your heart condemns you today, we could ask, how do you recover assurance? We're going to talk more about this, but simply put, John Stott says this so well. He says, it's the mind's knowledge by which the heart's doubts may be silenced. Well, what do you know about the truth? What have you read in your Bibles? What have you heard in church? What do you know to be true about God? It's by what is true that the accusations and the lying heart becomes quiet. The truth of the gospel silences lies of condemnation. This truth is illustrated pretty well in his story about the German reformer Martin Luther. So let me take you through this. As the story goes, Martin Luther once had a horrible dream. And in the dream, Satan came to him carrying 3 big scrolls under his arm. And he came very close to Martin Luther, and he unrolled the first one. And to Martin Luther's horror, it was written small and condensed and closely, sin after sin after sin after sin that Martin Luther had committed. Satan points to all of them and he says, did you do that? Did you say that? Did you think that? Martin Luther answers, yes. Have you got anything else? Why, yes, said Satan, and he unrolled the next 2 scrolls. Reading them, looking at them, Martin Luther responds, do you got any more? Satan says, no, but isn't that enough to damn anyone? You don't really think God could forgive you all of that, do you? And Martin Luther didn't answer, but he took a pen. And he wrote across each scroll, the blood of Jesus Christ cleanses me from all sin. And Satan vanished. That's the idea of silencing the heart's condemnations through what the mind knows to be true. And this is an assurance found when the troubled believer then calls to mind that God is bigger. He's bigger than any condemnation that the heart can muster, past, present, and even future. So church, be encouraged. God gets the last word every single time, which means if you've placed faith in Jesus Christ, you're allowed to be at rest. Give yourself permission to be at rest in His presence. God's given you permission. What else do you need? Now, For some of us, we could probably stop there and say, well, that's a good reminder for Father's Day, thank you. But John goes on. And having sorted out the problem of the condemning heart, he gives us some really practical instruction on daily assurance that I'm going to be honest was like I really enjoyed chewing on this week as I was getting ready for this, because I don't think I've ever thought about some of this stuff quite like this. So John tells us that communion with God, fellowship with God, relationship with God, daily rhythms with God is our daily assurance. Verse 21, dear friends, if our hearts do not condemn us, we have confidence before God and receive from him anything we ask because we keep his commands and do what pleases him. And this is his command, to believe in the name of his Son, Jesus Christ, and to love one another as he commanded us. The one who keeps God's commands lives in him, and he in them. This is how we know that he lives in us. We know it by the Spirit he gave us. So for any of us who've gone through days or even seasons of questioning our place in God's family, we know that spiritual anxiety has a way of breaking down our fellowship with God. I'm certain you've all experienced this. When we don't feel very secure in God's mercy and grace, in the victory of Jesus, it will shut down our communication with God. Simply to put it, that it affects our prayer life. When we feel very insecure, very distant, fellowship is broken, we don't pray very well. It's hard to pray and to talk to God relationally when we don't feel like we're in relationship with him. And then if we do pray, it's usually that we've mustered up sort of like an exasperated moment, and we offer prayers up to God that are usually rooted in our will or in our demands or in our own frustration, very, very self-absorbed, very self-centered type prayers. Do this for me. Why didn't you do this for me? Why have you let me down? Why aren't you answering that prayer? Very accusatory, very angry. And so prayer then is more like wishes and pleas to get us out of trouble than it is a communion with God. Now, additionally, when we don't feel secure in God's mercy and grace, the victory of Jesus, it can really affect our obedience to God's most core commands, like to believe in Jesus and to love others. Living right and living obedient and doing our best seems useless when we feel far from God. It's kind of like when you're trying to eat healthy and then you have one of those days and things just go off the rails. And then the next day it's harder because you're going, well, I already blew it, so why bother today? Right? And sometimes I think that's how we approach obedience with God. It's like, well, I'm not very good at this, and I haven't been very good at it lately. So what difference will it make if I just go off the rails for a little bit longer? We go on these disobedience benders. The person living under the weight of the heart's condemnation doesn't do or enjoy those practices that are some of the most major, consistent channels of God's assurance into the believer's life. Prayer, according to his will, and obedience to his commands. God has built into these areas of our life of discipleship, of the life of faith, that these will be places where he deposits his assurance into us. But these are often the areas that we scrap when things get a little tough. We feel a little condemned, and then we wonder why we don't feel very secure. The person whose heart is put at rest, then the life that's lived as an outflow of that restful heart in God's presence becomes a life of assurances. And John then lists prayer as an evidence of where we can be assured, and he says that we know God hears us. Well, when we feel like God has heard us, we feel pretty safe. I actually think that's probably about as safe as we can ever feel. When the heart's at rest, prayer becomes a conversation about kingdom priorities rather than just personal wishes and demands. A heart with no peace before God doesn't pray particularly well because it's, as I said, it's anxious or it's self-absorbed or it's even confused. But when that voice is silenced by God's grace, the person is assured of their acceptance, and then it's much easier to pray about things that God is going to listen to, because it's easier to live as God has asked us to do. So we're probably praying about things that are closer to his heart. so to speak. How can I explain this? So when we're not living at rest in God's presence, we might pray about like work, and we'll be like, oh God, like you got to get me out of this job or this meeting, or this employee is driving me crazy, or my boss is driving me crazy, or whatever it may be. And it becomes very self-absorbed and about me, and all these things I want to do. A kingdom-focused prayer in the exact same context may be, God, would you show me how to cultivate patience in this moment? God, would you show me how to operate in self-control when I go into that meeting? And suddenly God's got a way bigger vested interest, so to speak, in the development of that person and their character than just, I don't like them, eliminate them, God. Get them out of my life. It's a pain in my butt. Versus, God, make me more like your son and use this very difficult situation to bring kingdom purposes in my life and even in those people around me. God's going to get all over that a lot quicker than just sort it out, make it easy. So in verse 22, John says that God answers prayers because we keep his commands and do what pleases him. And he says, and this is his command, to believe in the name of his Son and to love one another as he's commanded us. And so when God speaks grace and acceptance over our heart, and our heart is placed at rest, obedience to his commands, specifically to believe in his Son and to love one another, becomes more and more a part of our life. And then those prayers become more and more rooted, as I've said, in the things of God's heart. But what is so beautiful about this and really special, this is what I was just like, this is actually like, God's so cool. One of the blessings of this life of obedience to his commands is not just moral excellence. It's not just like, oh, I'm killing it at my sanctification. It's not just like even that, oh, my prayer life is on fire, like God's just answering me. It's that God assures us in those practices, that there's assurance built into those most basic of rhythms. So in verse 24, John says, the one who keeps God's commands lives in him, and he in them. And this is how we know that he's in us. We know it by the Spirit he gave us. So God's designed it in such a way that when we obey his commands, he lives in us and us in him. And we know that spiritual, almost transcendent, otherworldly experience because the Holy Spirit, which he's given to us as a gift through the Son, deposited into us, is constantly, never, not ever at work, ministering to us truth and conviction and power, and reassuring us of our place, reminding us of who Jesus is and what he said and what he's done, convicting us of sin when we go off, on the beaten path, and bringing us back in. And when we do what God asks because our hearts are at rest, then we become assured, and God's very presence is active in our life. You see, I'm not sure that we think about it like this, but assurance is a natural fruit of obedience. When we do what God asks, we're assured. And I think we always just have assurance floating out there as this isolated experience. When we're feeling lousy, he just makes us feel better. But there's actually something that takes place where we live assured when we live as kingdom people and we live as disciples of Jesus. Now, if any of you aren't tracking with me, I'm going to show you the message translation of this little section because Eugene Peterson just makes it really, really clear, and it's probably going to be helpful for maybe all of you. So here it is again. And friends, once that's taken care of, once we no longer have these accusing or condemning hearts, condemning ourselves, we're bold and free before God. And we're able to stretch our hands out and receive what we asked for because we're doing what he said, doing what pleases him. Again, and then he doubles down, this is God's command, to believe in his personally named Son, Jesus Christ. He told us to love each other in line with the original command. And as we keep his commands, we live deeply and surely in him. And he lives in us. And this is how we experience his deep and abiding presence in us by the Spirit he gave us. What this translation helps make clear for me, at least, is that our tendency to see assurance and prayer and obedience as all isolated actions. We're so compartmentalized as Western thinkers. Everything's just like fragmented and in pieces and organized in files. But John teaches that prayer and answered prayer and obedience and living in God, in Him and us, they're all connected experiences. They're connected to one another, and they're actions that help put our heart at rest and produce assurance in our life. And so I said, if you're like feeling condemned or you're feeling restless or you're feeling distant from God, you're likely struggling with even the most basic commands, like belief in Jesus Christ and obedience to things like loving other people. And your prayers are likely not motivated by much more than self-interest. And then assurance is probably not a common experience. But John says we don't have to live like that. We can know that God lives in us and us in Him. The ultimate expression of assurance. And we can know it through these daily actions. You see, church is not as mystical as we make it out to be. Like, this is so basic in some senses, so connected to these most elementary Christian practices. And assurance, is so much more of a result or a fruit of other things than it is just this isolated deposit. And so as we bring this message into its application, I'm going to offer you this last consideration. If you're feeling anxious in your faith, I think the best question to ask yourself, and so I'll ask it in a sense rhetorically to you, but how are the basics of the Christian life going for you? If you've laid aside some of the most elementary actions that provide you with the greatest assurance, you're probably feeling insecure. And perhaps you've done so, perhaps you've laid it aside because the kingdom of this world and its foolishness has drawn you in. Earlier in this book, John talks about, the lust of the flesh and the eyes and all these roots of sin that are in the world and contaminating people. And so maybe the assurance is gone because you've bought into something else, a different gospel, so to speak, something that the world has told you. You know as well as I do that a cultural value today is that everybody wants to be in charge of their own dang life. Everybody wants to make their own decisions. They want to make their own truth. They want the Bible to mean what they think the Bible should mean. They want God to have our enlightened mind rather than for us to have God's mind, the mind of Christ. They want God to get with the times and quit being so old-fashioned, rather than us getting with His times, which are eternal and do not change. But if a person is left to speak for themselves, if that's really what we choose, if we want to write truth for ourselves, if we want to revise the Bible as if it's an outdated HR policy, or if we want to form God in our image and make Him more culturally in tune, then that person is left to defend themselves against their heart's condemnations and provide their own assurances for any and all insecurities as well. Both the lies spoken by the inner voice, but also those honest heart convictions. If we are God of our own little universe, then it is the accusation of our own little heart that we are responsible to remedy. But I believe with all conviction that John's words are for today every bit as much as they were 2,000 years ago. John says, I'm writing this letter to you so that you would know. And I want you to know, just as John wanted them to know, that you don't have a defense for your heart accusations. You have no assurance of eternal safety, no word for your insecurity in and of yourself. You don't. Only Jesus solves the problem of sin. Only Jesus can bring you from the finite life this world offers you into the infinite existence and relationship with the transcendent. Jesus is the only defense for the accusing heart, and He is the only assurance for the ultimately anxious soul. And that's why if our hearts are condemning us, the assurance isn't that you're awesome and cute and you're so smart and you're going to be okay. You're such a hard worker. The assurance is God's Son. The assurance is that He's bigger than your heart. The assurance is that the voice of grace spoken by God thunders over your voice of failure. The assurance is that His voice of truth cancels your heart's reminder of sin every time. You want to talk about cancel culture? God in Jesus cancels the entire culture of sin right out of your life. The assurance is that God's voice of love is bigger than your heart's voice of self-doubt. The assurance is that God knows everything about you and still accepts you gladly. Nobody else is going to do that. You won't even do that for yourself. Only God does it. And the reason God does this is because He's provided for you. And He's provided for me a righteousness that is not our own, but it's credited to us because of the shed blood of Jesus, which removes the stench and stain of every single sin and accusation, ever. Today, Jesus, not you, has brought you into communion with God, in which you can pray in faith, serve God and others in loving action as daily reminders to your own soul of your safe place in a very big, loving, and eternal God. So if you're feeling spiritually insecure, be encouraged. God's heart is to assure you, to reassure you, to remind you. And that assurance is found through something as obvious as belief and love and prayer. This is how we know we are in the truth and how we set our hearts at rest in His presence. So know it more, the more you know. And use that knowledge to remind your heart to speak in faith to your Father and in love to the world, enemies and all, in the character of the one whose righteousness you wear. The more you know this, the better. Don't accept your heart's story. There's no assurance there. But accept the assurance of a story in which you are a part that was written in the heart of God, your Heavenly Father. What a blessed assurance we have.